What led to the formation of the Nazis? What did they seek to achieve and how did they do it? The Nazi Party was one of several right-wing extremist political groups that emerged in Germany following World War I. It quickly advanced from political obscurity to political prominence, starting with the start of the Great Depression, eventually becoming the largest party in the German parliament in 1932. Who are the Nazis, and what did they seek to accomplish? In today's video, we will talk about the Nazis and their rise to power. Let's dive right in. Power grab. In the Third Reich, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, also known as the National Socialist German Workers' Party, established the most brutal and horrifying totalitarian government the world had ever known. But how were the Nazis able to politically dominate a highly advanced and sophisticated nation in the 20th century? One explanation for this, and key element in the Nazis' political power, was that in addition to using violence mercilessly to suppress dissent, they also had a complete mastery of propaganda, creating a national ideology based on their perverse views. Here, we examine some of their vilest and scariest strategies. By 1933, Hitler made progress toward achieving total authority over Germany. Under President Paul von Hindenburg, he had been appointed Chancellor before the March elections of that year. He had the second most influential political position in Germany as a result. Hitler and the Nazis immediately got to work establishing their dominance and eradicating any challenge to the party's rule over Germany. These tactics led to Hitler having complete authority by 1934. Hitler consolidated the roles of president and chancellor and took over as commander-in-chief of the German army. After President Hindenburg passed away from old age, he adopted the title of Führer and assumed total autocratic authority. He was possibly the most potent and persistent propaganda tool available to the Nazis. Hitler was hailed as a compelling speaker by his contemporaries, supporters, and adversaries alike. He could reduce complex issues to their most basic components and be able to sway audiences by passion as opposed to reason. Additionally, he obsessively maintained his public image and made sure that it was the driving force behind everything in the Nazi state. Without Adolf Hitler at its core, it is difficult, if not impossible, to envisage the Nazi tragedy. Mythology and folklore. For the Nazis, mythology and folklore tactics were crucial components of folk and tradition. Although the party's views on religion were nuanced, and, in the case of Hitler, somewhat muddled, they were aware of the potency of religious imagery and occult symbolism. The art of propaganda frequently invoked Teutonic gods and goddesses as well as Christian themes. These initiatives were made to support the Nazis' extreme nationalism by reinforcing the notion of a long-standing German national culture. Stranger still, senior leaders were intrigued by Eastern spirituality, and in 1938, the Nazis paid an official visit to Tibet. This may have been influenced by the Nazis' conception of Thule, which they believed to be the origin of Aryan peoples and to be a sort of Nazi Atlantis. Religion. This, however, led to the Nazis implementing policies to regulate religion, German youth, and to support and develop the notion of an Aryan race that was superior. The Nazis held that the Nordic and Germanic people belonged to the Aryans, a superior race of people. They desired to raise the birth rate of Aryans. In addition, they sought to eliminate race contamination. The Nazis viewed women's roles as that of wives and mothers, which would promote the expansion of the Aryan race. Women were supposed to take care of the family while staying at home. Women who wanted to become doctors, teachers, or civil workers had to give up their occupations. Newlyweds were given a loan of 1,000 marks under the law for the encouragement of marriage, and they were allowed to keep 250 marks for each child they had. A gold award was offered to mothers who had more than 8 children. Unmarried women could offer to become pregnant for an SS Aryan. They were able to maintain control over and shape the mentality of the German citizenry through indoctrination. The Concordat was ratified on June 20th, 1933. The German Catholic Church would be safeguarded under this agreement between the Nazis and the Pope. In exchange, the Church agreed not to speak out against the Nazis or engage in political discourse. As a result, the Catholic Church was unaffected by Hitler's decision to outlaw the Catholic Zentrum Party. Even though the Catholic Youth League was disbanded, Catholic priests were detained, and religious instruction was outlawed despite an agreement with the Pope. A German Christian church led by Nazi bishops was founded by Hitler. Ministers who rebelled by founding the confessional church, like Martin Niemöller, were condemned to concentration camps. The German populace was subjected to the Nazi brainwashing efforts to convert them to their way of life. They thought that the best way to accomplish this was to influence young people's thinking, so that they would develop into Nazi followers as they grew older. The state was in charge of education. Young adults who firmly believed in Nazi values were to be produced through Nazi schooling. It required teachers and university professors to join the National Socialist Teachers League, which called into doubt their capacity to instruct. They had to stick to a fairly rigid curriculum. Jewish and anti-Nazi instructors were fired. Textbooks were revised to provide a stronger emphasis on militarism and Nazi racial and political ideals. The curriculum included a pro-Nazi bent. Nuremberg Laws. With this tactic, the Nazis set laws called the Nuremberg Laws, which were announced on September 15th at the Nuremberg rally. Jewish people had many of their rights taken away. German citizenship was denied to Jews. Jewish and German marriage and connections were no longer permitted. Medical careers were off limits to Jews. They were required to carry identification cards with a J stamp. Jewish kids were denied an education and kept out of classrooms. Women had to add Sarah, while men had to add Israel. Jewish residences, businesses, and synagogues were targeted all over Germany and Austria on the evening of November 9th. Approximately 7,500 Jewish businesses were destroyed or damaged. There were 400 synagogues destroyed by fire. 30,000 Jewish people were taken to concentration camps, and just under 100 were murdered. To make up for the damage, the Jewish community was required to pay a fine of 1 billion marks, and they then had to clear the streets of all the shattered glass. Jews were prohibited from operating businesses. Jews were compelled to wear a yellow star and were required to wear the Star of David on their clothing starting on November 23, 1939. This made it simpler to recognize them. Due to the Nazis' persecution of Jews, many other Germans lived in constant fear of the Nazis turning on them. As a result, there were significantly fewer people willing to openly oppose the Nazis. In some areas, the Nazis were even praised for taking such action, which only strengthened their support. Make sure to subscribe to History Flicks and hit the bell icon so you won't miss any of my future history updates. The Jews. The Nazis blamed the Jews for unemployment. Germany's economy was in peril following the devastation of World War I and the Wall Street crash of 1929, with hundreds of thousands of people out of jobs. The Nazis placed the blame for this on the Jews. The Nazi Party claimed that they were a parasitic race that affixes itself to capitalist countries to undermine the government, society, and culture of their host country. Following the Nazis' ascent to power in 1933, Hitler's passionate anti-Semitism became even more prominent in party doctrine. The Nazis established a group of scapegoats that could be used as an easy target for nearly everything by blaming a minority racial group for all of the nation's problems. Boys were urged to join youth organizations that eventually evolved into the Hitler Youth, to assist regulate German youth outside of school and to prepare them for life in the Third Reich. Hitler Youth was instructed in military tactics, survival skills, and the value of physical fitness. Young people's organizations that developed into the League of German Maidens were urged to include girls. Girls' clubs emphasized the value of having many children and advised on how to be a good wife. UFOs. One of the scariest tactics was the UFOs. There has been conjecture regarding Nazi connections to UFOs for many years. The truth is that the Nazis did possess aircraft that were considerably more advanced than anything that man had invented up to that point. In fact, the majority of aircraft at the start of the conflict were biplanes. Finally, Germany was about to launch its first manned jet aircraft. It all started right after the war. For some reason, the Nazi Third Reich claimed the Antarctic region of New Swabia in 1938 and dispatched a military expedition there. The US military deployed their own covert expedition there after the war, since this was so suspicious, and the results are still under wraps. The Nazis began sending out missions around the globe in 1933 to look for religious and mythological items that were associated with the weird energy they dubbed Vril. The Nazis heavily investigated in jet propulsion technology and were at the forefront of it. This comprised various flying saucer-shaped ships as well as the flying wing of the Horten. There were reports of UFO sightings throughout the conflict. These primarily took the form of odd flying lights known as Foo Fighters, which circled around Allied planes. Actually, the Allies thought that these were hostile aircraft built deliberately to bother them with cutting-edge electromagnetic interference. Top scientists were asked to look at the Foo Fighter due to how frequent and annoying it was. Some of them had actually damaged Allied craft, leading Allied intelligence to believe they were superior to German technology. Oddly, news of Foo Fighters persisted after the war. Beginning in 1947, reports of UFO sightings skyrocketed. Commercial and military aircraft were buzzed by fast-moving lights, and eyewitnesses on the ground also reported seeing them. In order to look into the rising issue, the US government established Project Sign. The German UFO theories discuss allegedly successful efforts to create advanced aircraft or spacecraft before and during World War II, and they further assert that these vehicles survived the war in covert underground bases in Antarctica, South America, or the United States, along with their designers. Even though the Foo Fighter incident may have been the largest UFO incident to have occurred on Earth, it is still not taken seriously. No one has established what they were. We still don't have a craft that can maneuver in the same way they did today. Alternatively, ghost rockets were made by Finnish observers on February 26, 1946. About 2,000 sightings were logged between May and December 1946, with peaks on 9 and 11 August 1946. Radar reports from 200 sightings were confirmed, and investigators found actual rocket fragments that were believed to be from ghost rockets. It was concluded that the meteors were likely to blame for numerous reports of ghost rocket sightings. The majority of ghost rocket sightings, however, did not take place during meteor shower activity and exhibited traits unrelated to meteors, such as maneuverability. It was assumed in 1946 that these were Soviet long-range tests of captured German V-1 or V-2 missiles, and that they came from the former German rocket base at Peenemünde. The Swedish army responded by issuing an order prohibiting publications from reporting the precise location of ghost rocket sightings, or any details regarding the direction or speed of the object. German technology also started to show up again in 1947. It was observed that the certain UFO reports matched the German Horten brothers' advanced flying wing aeronautical designs. The Germans had several innovative aircraft and guided missile designs in development when World War II concluded. Although the majority were still in their very early phases, they were the only known craft that could even come close to matching the performance of UFOs seen by UFO observers. Some claim flying discs were designed and studied in Germany and Italy as early as 1942. In an interview with Der Spiegel, German engineer Rudolf Schriever claimed to have created a ship that was propelled by a circular plane of whirling turbine engines that was 49 feet, 15 meters in diameter. When he fled to Czechoslovakia in April 1945, he claimed that he and his crew had worked on the project at BMW's Prague facilities. After his disc designs and model were taken from his Bremerhaven Lear studio in 1948, he was certain that Czech agents had manufactured his product for a foreign power. When questioned about the theft in October 1952, he claimed that it happened on May 14, 1945, while he was hiding out near Regen on a farm. Supposed German flying discs were divided into two categories by Klein. On a non-rotating disc that Richard Meade, a V-2 rocket engineer, invented at Breslau and which the Soviets later took control of while Meade fled to the US through France, and eventually found employment with Avro. A disc developed by Rudolf Schriever and Klaus Habermohl in Prague consisted of a ring of moving turbine engines around a fixed cockpit. On the 14th of February 1945, when it was able to fly to a height of 12,400 meters, 40,700 feet, in 3 minutes and reach a speed of 2,200 kilometers per hour, 1,400 miles per hour, in a level flight. Klein claimed to have witnessed this craft's first crewed flight. Autarky. The Nazis applied a tactic called autarky, which means that the Nazis aimed to make Germany self-sufficient, or able to manufacture all the things it required independently of other sources. This was called autarky. A significant public works program was carried out by the Nazis, including the construction and restoration of dwellings, railroads, and highways. This, along with extensive military rearmament, contributed greatly to the decline in unemployment. The expansion of Germany's military forces led to the creation of thousands of jobs in the industries of iron, steel, aviation, and shipbuilding. Conscription of males into the army after 1935 also assisted in lowering unemployment rates. Many Germans were able to tolerate Nazi rule since this was viewed as being advantageous to the nation. Young men in Germany were required by the German Labor Service to serve in public works programs for 6-month periods. Strikes were avoided once German Labor Front, DAF, replaced the trade unions. Many Germans chose underpaid employment over unemployment. A company called KDF, or Strength Through Joy, was founded to improve people's lives. This meant that devoted employees received perks like discounted vacations, access to sports facilities, and theater tickets. Others appreciated the better amenities, even though some people despised being restricted in their recreational activities. The 1938 Volkswagen Beetle production of the People's Automobile gave the impression that workers were gaining from Nazism. They could reserve one of these vehicles and put aside funds each week for 2 years to purchase it. Under the Nazis, the German economy appeared to be doing well. The unemployment rate looked to decrease. This aided the Nazis in presenting themselves as Germany's saviors. In truth, propaganda and the exclusion of specific groups from the official statistics were to blame for the apparent decline in unemployment. Women and Jews, for instance, were fired from their jobs, but were not included in the unemployment rate. The Nazis' goal of achieving autarky and self-sufficiency was not achieved, despite the unemployment issue appearing to be resolved. Propaganda. Propaganda was a tool the Nazis employed to manipulate the German populace. The media and the arts were under Joseph Goebbels' authority as Minister for National Enlightenment. While coordinating the censorship of opposing viewpoints, Goebbels made sure that Germans were fed Nazi propaganda. Radios were inexpensive to purchase and would transmit Nazi party speeches and propaganda. Nazi propaganda was broadcast through loudspeakers in public spaces. Hitler was portrayed as Germany's savior, and his image was portrayed everywhere. Newspapers have long been a potent tool for swaying public opinion. Der Stürmer, also known as the attacker, was the most notorious of the Nazi publications. It was a significant component of the propaganda war, even though it was independent of the official party rule and Goering's departments. He officially barred it from his offices. The tabloid style, virulent anti-Semitism, and profane tone of this Julius Streicher publication made it popular with other party officials. Hitler himself was quoted as saying that he read it with pleasure, from the first page to last, and commended how well it spoke to the man on the street. In addition to entering German households, the party also intervened in social life, dictating what people would pay to see and attend. The goal of the 1933 establishment of the Department of Film was to convey the nationalist socialist worldview to the entire German people. It did this primarily by hosting film screenings, which were common and well-attended events in German cities and villages. Both Hitler and Goebbels were enamored with the medium and frequently hosted movie screenings in their own houses. Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will, which depicts the 1934 rally in Nuremberg, and The Wandering Jew, a 1940 film that attacks Jews in a documentary style, are two of the most well-known works of Nazi filmmaking. Nazi philosophy. The German people were introduced to Nazi philosophy through their employment of straightforward slogans like Free Germany from the Jews, Work and Bread, Smash Communism, Blood and Soil, and One People, One Empire, One Leader. Germans were exposed to Nazi philosophy and rule in a variety of ways. The Nuremberg protests, which promoted organization, the military, and war, highlighted the glorification of Nazi Germany. Any form of media that advocated against Nazi ideas or even other lifestyles was censored. Newspaper, radios, movies, and theaters were all subject to strict censorship. Only works that supported Nazi ideology were permitted. All other books were prohibited, and many were set on fire in public. If you like this, subscribe to our channel and explore more history and mystery with us. Thank you for watching this video, and don't forget to tell us what you think about this video in the comments section. If you like this one, check out our others on History Flicks. I will see you in the next one. Until then, goodbye.